The Exile's Edge. The Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Station fell silent as the final vote appeared on the massive holographic display. Representative Zorax of the Thalassian Confederacy rose from his seat, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he addressed the gathered delegates from across the galaxy. "The motion passes with an overwhelming majority," he announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into the standard galactic language. "The species known as humans, originating from the planet Earth in System Sol 3, are hereby declared a quarantined species." Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone at the center of the hall, her face betraying no emotion despite the devastating verdict. Thousands of alien representatives looked down at her from their elevated platforms, some with pity, others with open contempt. "You make a grave mistake," Chen said, her voice steady. "Humanity has only just begun its journey among the stars. We have much to offer the Assembly." Zorax's membranous frill flared with irritation. "The evidence speaks for itself, Ambassador. In the mere 50 years since discovering faster-than-light travel, your species has demonstrated alarming tendencies toward aggression, territorial expansion, and technological adaptation at rates that threaten galactic stability." The Vexian delegate, a crystalline entity that pulsed with blue light when speaking, added, "Your species wages war against itself for resources, ideology, and power. What would you do to other worlds if given unrestricted access to the stars?" Chen looked around the vast chamber. "We've shared our art, our music, our literature. We've offered medical breakthroughs and engineering innovations. Yes, we have our flaws, but isolation will not help us grow. It will only." "The Assembly has spoken," Zorax interrupted. "Earth and its colonies will be restricted to a 10-light-year radius from your home system. Any human vessel found beyond this boundary will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. All technology exchanges are suspended indefinitely." As Chen was escorted from the hall, Zorax added one final pronouncement. "The quarantine begins immediately. May your species learn wisdom in isolation." On the journey back to Earth, Chen sat in her quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony, staring at the stars streaking past. Her aide, Marcus Lee, entered after a respectful knock. "The emergency broadcast has reached all colonial outposts," he said. "Earth's government is preparing a public address." Chen nodded absently. "They're afraid of us, Marcus." "With respect, Ambassador, perhaps they should be." She turned to him, surprised by his tone. "I've compiled the data from our intelligence networks," he continued, placing a secure tablet before her. "The Assembly didn't just vote to quarantine us because of our history. They've been monitoring our technological growth rate. We're advancing too quickly for their comfort." The tablet displayed comparison charts showing human innovation curves against other spacefaring species, where others took centuries to advance. Humans made the same progress in decades. "They've placed watchtowers at the edge of our new boundary," Marcus said. "Advanced monitoring stations with weapons capabilities. They're not just containing us. They're prepared to eliminate us if we step out of line." Chen's diplomatic composure finally cracked. "After everything we've offered them, this is how they repay our goodwill. They fear what they don't understand. Perhaps it's time we gave them something real to fear." 3 months after the quarantine began, Commander Elena Reyes stood in a secure underground facility beneath the Olympus Mons colony on Mars. Before her, holographic displays showed the status of over 50 secret projects initiated under her authority. The room was filled with Earth's most brilliant minds, scientists, engineers, and military strategists who had been quietly assembled. "The Assembly believes they've contained us," Reyes addressed the room. "They expect us to plead for redmission, to bend to their rules and accept a subordinate role in their precious galactic community." She gestured to a schematic rotating slowly above the central table. "Instead, we will use this isolation to our advantage. Project Phantom begins today." Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, the lead physicist, stepped forward. "Commander, the theoretical work on the phase shift drive is promising, but we're years away from a working prototype." "You have 18 months," Reyes replied. The assembly believes human ingenuity is dangerous. Let's prove them right. Across Earth and its colonies, the public face of humanity showed compliance with the quarantine. Official channels broadcast messages of peaceful acceptance and introspection. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of dead moons and within hollowed-out asteroids, a different narrative unfolded. The first breakthrough came 8 months later, when Dr. Nakamura's team successfully tested a prototype phase shift drive that could temporarily shift a vessel partially out of normal spacetime, rendering it virtually undetectable to standard sensors. 6 months after that, weapons research produced energy systems that left no radiation signature. In the asteroid belt beyond Mars, massive automated mining operations extracted resources under the guise of standard colonial development, while the true purpose remained hidden from assembly monitoring satellites. The raw materials disappeared into fabrication yards concealed within the dwarf planet Ceres and Jupiter's lifeless moons. Commander Reyes stood on the observation deck of the first completed stealth vessel, the HSV Spectre. Beyond the reinforced viewport, dozens more ships took shape in the hidden shipyard carved into the heart of Ganymede. Each vessel incorporated technology that would have been freely shared with the assembly in another timeline, now weaponized in secret. The prototypes exceed expectations, reported Captain Javier Ortiz as he joined her at the viewport. Phase shift capabilities allow us to move in and out of assembly territory without detection. Our first reconnaissance teams have already mapped key strategic locations across 3 sectors. Reyes nodded. And the long-range outposts. Construction is complete on facilities in the Oort cloud and beyond. As far as the assembly knows, we're contained within their boundary. They have no idea we've already expanded far beyond their arbitrary line. And they won't, Reyes said firmly, until we're ready to reveal ourselves on our terms. The assembly's watchtowers maintained their vigilant observation of human space. Their sensors detected normal colonial development, the expected commerce between Earth and its established settlements. Occasionally, human ships would approach the boundary, observe the warning beacons, and dutifully turn back. What they couldn't see were the phase-shifted vessels slipping silently between their monitoring nets, studying their defenses, and venturing deeper into the galaxy. The humans observed, learned, and returned with invaluable intelligence about the civilizations that had rejected them. 5 years into the quarantine, humanity's shadow fleet numbered over 300 vessels of various classes. Hidden shipyards worked continuously, adding to their strength. Research teams adapted and improved technologies glimpsed during reconnaissance missions. Training academies prepared crews for operations in deep space, far from Earth's support. Elena Reyes, now admiral of the newly formed Phantom Fleet, addressed the secret Joint Chiefs in their secure facility beneath Olympus Mons. "The time for passive reconnaissance is ending," she announced. "The Assembly believes we've accepted our fate as a quarantined species. They'd grown complacent in their monitoring. Now we begin the next phase." On the main display appeared the image of a remote assembly outpost near the border of Thalassian space, far beyond humanity's quarantine zone. This research station holds significant scientific data that could advance our understanding of dimensional physics, Reyes explained. It's minimally defended and isolated from major travel routes. General Hassan Karim, head of special operations, stood. "You're proposing we steal from the assembly. The risk is calculated," Reyes finished. "Our intelligence confirms a 3-day window when the station will be operating with a skeleton crew during their religious observance. We'll leave no trace of human involvement." The mission was approved by a narrow margin. 3 weeks later, the stealth vessel HSV Wraith slipped into position near the research outpost. Its phase shift drive engaged, rendering it invisible to the station's sensors. The boarding team, equipped with advanced EVA suits that masked life signs, entered the facility without triggering a single alarm. They downloaded the research data, took biological samples from the laboratory, and departed, all while the reduced station staff continued their duties, oblivious to the intrusion. By the time the Wraith returned to human space, scientists were already analyzing the stolen information. It was the first of many such operations. For the next 5 years, Phantom ships conducted surgical strikes across assembly space, never attacking directly, never causing casualties, but systematically harvesting technology, data, and resources. Each successful mission emboldened humanity's shadow leaders and accelerated their development. Beyond the quarantine boundary, the stars held no suspicion of the storm gathering in the shadows. The assembly continued to monitor what they believed was a contained, resentful, but ultimately compliant human species. They had no idea that humanity had already escaped their cage and was preparing to redefine the balance of power among the stars. The Phantom Dominion. 10 years after the quarantine began, Zorax of the Thalassian Confederacy stood before an emergency session of the Assembly Security Council. His usually orderly frill trembled with agitation as he addressed the gathered representatives. "Another outpost has gone dark," he reported grimly. "That makes 7 in the past 3 months. Each facility was found intact but stripped of critical technology and data. No signs of forced entry, no casualties, not even security footage of the intruders." The Vexian delegate pulsed anxiously. "Our analysts can find no pattern to these incursions. Military installations, research centers, resource depots, all targeted with surgical precision. Yet we still have no idea who is responsible." A murmur rippled through the council chamber. For nearly a decade, the assembly had enjoyed relative peace. Now an invisible enemy moved freely through their territory, striking where and when they pleased. "What of the humans?" asked a reptilian Sarkan delegate. "Their quarantine remains secure." "Completely," Zorax confirmed. "Our monitoring stations report no unusual activity within their boundary. Their development continues at a steady but contained pace. They've shown no signs of testing our restrictions." The council adjourned with increased security protocols authorized across assembly space. Not a single representative connected the Phantom raids to the quarantine species they had dismissed a decade earlier. Within the human quarantine zone, Admiral Elena Rice reviewed the latest intelligence reports in her command center, now relocated to a massive station hidden in Neptune's shadow. The facility, officially designated Deep Space Monitoring Station Triton, in Earth's public records, was in reality the nerve center of humanity's shadow empire. "The Assembly remains completely unaware of our involvement," reported her intelligence chief, Commander Sophia Diaz. "They've increased security patrols, but our phase shift technology renders them ineffective." Rice studied the strategic display showing human assets scattered throughout assembly space, cloaked outposts, hidden research facilities, and the positions of over 40 stealth fleets. What had begun as a desperate response to rejection had evolved into something far more significant. "And the Nexus Project?" Rides asked. "Complete," Diaz replied with evident satisfaction. "The quantum communication network now spans all human territories, both acknowledged and shadow. Our ships and outposts can coordinate instantaneously without detection." Captain Ortiz, now a fleet commander, entered the briefing room. "Admiral, the Assembly is gathering a task force at Centauri Waypoint. It appears they're finally mounting a serious investigation into the Phantom raids." Rice considered this development. "They're getting closer to discovering the truth. Perhaps it's time we revealed ourselves, on our terms." The plan was audacious. After a decade of operating in shadows, humanity would step into the light in a display of force that would redefine their position in the galactic community. 3 days later, the Assembly Task Force departed from Centauri Waypoint. 50 vessels strong, representing the combined might of 6 major civilizations, they began a systematic sweep of the sector where the latest Phantom raid had occurred. Admiral Talox of the Sarkan Imperial Guard commanded from the dreadnought Unyielding Claw. "Spread out in standard search formation," he ordered. "Full sensor suites. Whatever has been haunting our borders, we will find it today." 6 hours into the search, a junior sensor officer reported an anomaly. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations at coordinates 227 Mark 43. T-Lox narrowed his vertical pupils. Investigate, but approach with caution. As the task force altered course to examine the disturbance, the fabric of space before them seemed to ripple. Then, in a moment that would be recorded in assembly history, humanity revealed its true power. Ships appeared, first a dozen, then dozens more, then hundreds. They materialized from what had appeared to be empty space, their hulls gleaming with unfamiliar technology. The assembly task force found itself surrounded by a fleet that dwarfed their own. A communication request came through on all channels. On the bridge of the unyielding claw, a human woman appeared on the main view screen. She wore a dark uniform with minimal insignia and regarded the assembled alien crew with calm confidence. "I am Admiral Elena Reyes of the Terran Phantom Dominion," she announced. "Your assembly rejected humanity from the galactic community 10 years ago. You imprisoned us behind arbitrary boundaries and expected us to accept your judgment." T-Lox found his voice. How is this possible? Your species has been monitored. There has been no sign-off." "Of what?" Reyes interrupted. "Of the fleet before you. Of our outposts and colonies now established throughout assembly space." "Of course not. You saw what we allowed you to see." The implications dawned on the assembly forces. The phantom raids, the missing technology, the inexplicable security breaches, all carried out by a species they had thought safely contained. "Are you declaring war?" T-Lox asked, tension evident in his translated voice. Reyes smiled slightly. "If we wanted war, Admiral, this conversation wouldn't be happening. Your task force would already be destroyed. No, we're declaring our independence from assembly restrictions and our rightful place among the stars." With precise timing, quantum communication signals activated across assembly space. On every major world, in every seat of government, human representatives appeared simultaneously, delivering the same message. The quarantine was over. Humanity had never truly accepted it. "We offer two paths forward," Reyes continued. "Acknowledge the Terran Phantom Dominion as a sovereign power with all rights and privileges of assembly membership, or face an adversary that can strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. We have operated in your midst for a decade without detection. Consider carefully what that means." The assembly convened an emergency session that lasted 5 days. Reports flooded in from across controlled space confirming the human claims. Hidden outposts were revealed voluntarily as proof of their reach. The phase shift technology that had rendered their ships invisible was demonstrated openly. On the 6th day, Representative Zorax once again addressed the assembly hall. This time, Admiral Elena Reyes stood where Ambassador Chen had stood a decade earlier. The gallery was silent, the thousands of representatives subdued by the revelation of their collective failure. "The Assembly acknowledges the sovereignty of the Terran Phantom Dominion," Zorax announced, his translator unable to fully mask the undertone of humiliation in his voice. "All quarantine restrictions are hereby lifted. Humanity is welcomed as an equal member of the galactic community." Reyes stepped forward. "The Dominion accepts this recognition. In the spirit of moving forward, we offer to share certain technologies developed during our isolation, technologies that will benefit all species." As she spoke, data packages were transmitted to the assembly archives. Medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration techniques, agricultural innovations, carefully selected gifts that demonstrated humanity's capacity for creation as well as their potential for destruction. 10 years ago, you feared what humanity might become if left unchecked," Reyes concluded. "You were right to be concerned, but wrong in your approach. Instead of guiding us, you rejected us. Instead of partnership, you chose containment. Remember this moment when you encounter other emerging species. Fear and isolation breed exactly what you sought to prevent." As Reyes returned to her flagship, the HSV Vindication, she gazed out at the assembled human fleet hovering near Nexus Station, a visible reminder of the invisible empire they had built. The quarantine that was meant to contain humanity's potential had instead focused it, refined it, and transformed it into something the galaxy had never anticipated. The Phantom Dominion had emerged from the shadows, and the stars would never be the same.